Well, hey, my brothers, Hugh Halter here, round two. And hopefully last week was great for you to get these groups kicked off. I heard great reports. There were dudes meeting in homes and online, and sounds like everything went very well. But if, for whatever reason, you found yourself in an awkward social arrangement and you just don't know what to do this week, just make some bacon. I find that somehow that smooths everything out. So a little bacon, we'll get going. So last week, I was trying to figure out like an overarching theme for this teaching through Isaiah 58, and just kind of pondering. I just thought we're going to call this entire series True Faith, just getting beyond a lot of the, I guess, religious stuff, and even getting beyond this COVID season that has revealed a lot of things, maybe to us, about who we are and what our faith matters. If it matters at all, whether or not we're just going through the motions. So we're going to try to get on to some true faith. Last week, we kind of kicked off thinking about being more spiritually receptive, that even if we've been in it a long time, sometimes we lose our sense of hunger to grow and mature and be transformed by the story of Jesus 2,000 years ago. So I don't know, hopefully those questions were helpful to you and just trying to analyze whether or not you're even receptive. Obviously, if we're not receptive at all, Jesus would say things like, he who has ears to hear, right? So it's not that we don't hear things or read things or watch videos, but it's our level of receptivity that's really the key to that. And then we also talked about cultivating the life of God, not just hoping that things change for us, but literally waking up in the morning, going to bed at night, thinking about the cultivation, actually the work that we do to see the work of God in our life. So if you were at the men's retreat a few years ago, I think I mentioned it, but when Jesus talked about his life, he used the Greek word Zoe, Z-O-E, and it meant a certain kind of life. When he says, I came that you might have life and have it more abundantly, he was saying, I came that you might have Zoe, and it's a type of life that is born of his kingdom, that's not of this world, and it's like it's a COVID-resistant life. Doesn't matter how good or how bad things might be. Zoe is this thing that wells up within us that creates and produces the things that we really want. So if you remember at the end of Isaiah, it gives a lot of promises to us. I'm just going to read them off, that we would sense God's healing, that we would be led by him, that we would be protected, that when we pray, we would get quick answers to prayer. We'd feel like we actually are talking literally to the creator of the universe, and that we get movement when we talk to him. That it says that he'll satisfy our needs. And then it gives a description that we would be like well-watered gardens. I love that in a fire season that we're having right now, just scorched earth, that the ones that walk with Jesus are the ones that are like a well-watered. It's almost like we have a lush life. Zoe is like lush living, like doesn't matter how dry it is, there's something within us that wells up. And even Psalms will talk about that we are like a tree planted by streams of living water, and it yields fruit in all seasons. And there's other Psalms that talk about those that are with God are like a fountain. People would come to us because there's just something in us. So that's our hopes for this. So let's talk a little bit about the enemy of Zoe this morning, because there's really one big overarching thing that Jesus was most concerned about, and that the prophet Isaiah is prophesying about. It's like it's never changed. It's always been the same with men. That the number one enemy of Zoe is religion. Just going through the motions. And, a couple ways. One is self-centered religion. Remember last week we talked about, or we read through the first passage where apparently the people of God were feeling like they were doing pretty good. They were actually confused that God was not answering them. And they actually really cared about, certain things. And they were fasting, which is like the hardest spiritual discipline you can do. So they were doing a lot of religious things, but they were almost like they were sucking their thumbs that God was not impressed or whatever. And so, you could say the first form of religion that stifles or snuffs out Zoe life in you is when your religion is self-centered. I was listening to a podcast a few months ago about the new emerging religion of our day. There's the 5 major religions, but he was saying no, in the West, in America especially, there's what they call TMD, therapeutic moralistic deism. And think about that. Is that not what most of us, even if we're in the church, what we've settled for? Therapeutic, in that we, whatever our faith is, it's for us. It makes us feel good. It therapies us, allows us to navel gaze, and it's very self-focused on us. It's moralistic in that we at least are trying to be better people. Why pick a religion where you're trying to be worse? So there is some moralism to it, but it's gray area. You're just trying to be a little bit better than the worst guy in jail type of thing. And then deism, in that we we believe that there's a God, but there's no spiritual connection to that. So it's more of an outside exterior force. But that does seem to kind of sum it up. Even people who go to church can take on that as their faith instead of the way of Jesus, the life of Jesus. So that's why he oftentimes is confronting the religious leaders, the teachers, because they're leading people astray and they're missing the life of the Zoe that he came to bring. The second part of the religion screwing up Zoe, which is really the focus of this week, is what we call on hypocritical religion. It's where the rhetoric of your faith doesn't line up with the reality of what you're doing. So I want to read this. It says, yet on the day of your fasting, you do as you please, and you exploit all your workers, and your fasting ends in quarreling and strife and in striking each other with fists. So there you go. There's the picture. You got God's people going through the motions, going to church, and then even on the Sabbath, these guys may not be working because, it would have been a no-no to work on the Sabbath, but they send their workers out to work. And then they go down to the shop to check in on how the sales are going. And when they get down there, some fights ensue, and pretty soon you got the owner, doing fisticuffs out in the parking lot with his boys, and then going back to fasting. And so the prophet Isaiah is going, guys, this just doesn't work. He actually says you cannot fast as you do today. You can't go through the religious motions like you're going through right now and expect your voice to be heard on high. I had a good friend of mine a couple of years ago before we moved to Alton. In fact, it's what caused us to move to Alton. We were just in a kind of a men's accountability group, and he just posed the question. He said, in most of our life, we have done certain spiritual things, disciplines, kind of patterns of spiritual formation. He goes, do you ever think that maybe in the next season of life that the spiritual disciplines that we did in the past may not be enough to get us through this next season? Like, might there need to be an upgrade in our spiritual formation? So that's what led to an actual sabbatical. I never took rest to really listen to God, and it was during that time that God revealed that we would move our whole family across the country. So, maybe that's a question for you this morning as you think about that, is, to get past the hypocrisy. It just means that there's a fraudulent element. That's the kind of the derivation of the word hypocrite. It's that you're a fraud, and that sounds terrible, right? But I think all of us recognize that there's parts of us that are not aligned to the way of Jesus. And so in some ways, those are, if we just keep the same patterns, we download the sermon from our pastor, or we might read a book, or we might even take a moment in the truck and pray, but yet we still have stuff going on in our real life, our work life, our home, where people will go, no, Hugh, there seems to be a difference between what you say you believe and how it sort of plays out in real life. And so that's what the Lord is getting on to. I'm going to read, this is extra credit, but you might bip into Matthew 23. This is a passage where Jesus is very honestly losing his mind on religious people, and he's calling them, he literally over and over calls them hypocrites. And I don't have time to read all of them, but I would love it if you guys would read through this, and I'll pick out a few of them. Jesus is going, hey, watch out for the teachers and the Pharisees. They're hypocrites. Be careful. So you must be careful to do everything that they tell you, but don't do what they do, because they don't do what they say that you should do. Okay, so that's the basis of hypocrisy. You say something, but it just doesn't show up. Then he goes, everything they do is done for people to see. They change their clothing. They try to get the right seat at the table in the synagogues. They love to be greeted with respect in the marketplace and be called rabbi by others. It's the hypocrisy of reputation. When you go to church, because deep down it really helps out your financial services clientele list, or your real estate business or insurance, just like it's good business to go to church. That's the hypocrisy that he's talking about right here. It's another one. He says, "Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You travel over land and sea to win a single convert, and when you have succeeded, you make them out to be twice as much a child of hell as you are." We would use the word SOB probably, but that's exactly what child of hell means. He's going, guys, you think you're doing a religious thing to actually reach out to your buddies, but then when you win one, you can make a convert, they end up being the same old bag of weeds that you are. Like, there's nothing special. There's a truism in our faith that generally people around us, they become like us. So we produce who we are. So if we are authentic, there's not really much difference between our faith and our life, then usually people will become authentic people around us. If our kids watch us and they know that we've gone to church our whole life and there's not a whole lot of difference in dad and how the relationship is at home, then they become like us. If they see in our marriage that there's not a whole lot of inspiration there, usually our kids will either just choose not to get married, or they will go through the same thing we do. So we really do reproduce who we are. That's why God is, when he yells at us, he's not yelling as if he's trying to shame us. He's yelling at us like a really loving father. That's and I've done this many times. I just want to get my kids' attention. Like, guys, this is serious. It could be so much better for you if you took a look and you really dealt with the hypocrisy that exists in your life. I'm going to share a story that I shared in a book a long time ago, but it's still a very vivid story to me, because hypocrisy it's not just that it steals from us. It gives a witness to the world that maybe this thing's not even real. So it actually stops people from following Jesus. And it's the story of a woman that called me out of the blue one day, and she had a friend in Los Angeles. She was out in Denver, Colorado, where we were, and she was trying to get married. She was a Seventh-day Adventist gal that I believe she loved the Lord, but she was trying to figure things out. She was a little unstable, and she had ended up getting engaged with this hard-driving Irishman. And, a typical pastor was not going to marry him for a lot of reasons, and she heard that maybe I would, so I'm an Irish guy, so I was like, yeah, I'll meet him. And so I met old Bosco, and Bosco was hilarious. He swore a lot. He seemed really sincere, though, but he told me he was an atheist. And, I said, why do you want to marry Lisa? And, it seemed like they had a really good foundation, but neither of them really were walking with God. And so I'm like, yeah, I'd be happy to do this, love to stay in touch with you and stuff like that. And so we ended up doing the wedding, and it was on Lisa's father's land. He was Seventh-day Adventist, kind of high up in the church. And if you don't know much about that, it's a very legalistic, no alcohol scenario. Not having alcohol does not make you legalistic. Let me fix that. But in that faith system, a lot of things, it's just you can't do. So alcohol is one of those things that you just can't touch. So we go to this Irish wedding, and there's no Irish drink. And I was kind of a bad pastor. I smuggled in some JMO. And after the pictures were being taken right before the service, I had about 25, 30 minutes. I grabbed Bosco. I said, hey, grab some of your mates that flew in from Ireland. Hop in my Jeep. I want to drive down the little country road here. So drove him about a mile, outside the gate. So I was, not in the man's land, so to speak. And I took out these small little Jameson bottles, and I just said, hey, guys, I wanted to do a toast to you, a little Irish blessing. And Bosco, when he saw the JMO, he started to tear up, and he gave me a huge hug, and he just went, Hugh, I can't believe you were this thoughtful. You know how much this means that my buddies have come over, and yeah, it's weird that we can't celebrate the way that we used to. And so we did a little Irish toast, and then drove back in and, did the wedding. And then later, Bosco and we did become pretty good friends. And I was asking him one time, like, Bosco, why did you decide that you were going to be an atheist? Like, where along the journey? And he began to unpack a story that I did put in a book because it was so powerful to me. But when Bosco was 5, living up in Northern Ireland, and his father was part of the resistance there. And if you know much about the history, it was very brutal, very violent. And apparently, one morning, his mother shoved him under the kitchen table and told him to be quiet and not to say a word. And all of a sudden, some henchmen rolled in and brought his father into the kitchen by gunpoint. And they were threatening to kill him. And Bosco remembers praying to God, asking God to spare his dad at 5 years of age. And right as he was praying, he heard the gunshot go off, and he saw his father fall with his face looking underneath the table at Bosco as he died. And then 2 weeks later, they're in church, and he sees the man that shot his father taking communion. And that was the moment that Bosco decided that there was no God. That this is the power of hypocrisy. This is why the Lord, prior to Jesus, and why the Lord, as Jesus, said, guys, the worst thing that the world can watch is hypocrisy. It's the one sort of stench. It's the thing that when you see it, you just can't take it. And it just gives such an offsetting view to the world about what God is like. And so that's why he's really saying, like, guys, take this seriously. Like, don't just act like something is okay when it's not. Don't just hide something because you think you can get away with it. Eventually, all things are seen, and the scriptures teach that God sees all things. There's a wonderful passage that says, the eyes of the Lord move to and fro across the world, across the earth. He may be a strong support to those whose heart is completely his. This is God going, guys, I do see everything. Like, even though you might think you can hide it and live a double life, like, everything's laid before the Lord. And so coming out of hypocrisy is just accepting the fact that you are really seen, even if it's just between you and God. And if you ever want to go, okay, yeah, there are some parts of my life that I'm not proud of that I know could be more aligned with Zoe. How do I become not a hypocrite? There's really only one way. And fortunately, Jesus makes it really simple. One way to move out of hypocrisy, and that is just to simply confess the stuff that you struggle with. The moment, just like when I walk up to McKenna, up to her room, it was a very poignant evening after I had screamed and yelled, which I don't really do a lot. This was back when she was in 8th grade. I just remember I just didn't know how to get out of it. I knew she saw some stuff in me that she didn't like and I didn't like. And I just went up and I said, hey, McKenna, I really want to apologize. I just was not very much like Jesus tonight. And I'm really sorry. I'm trying to kind of do a redo with him. So would you please pray for me? And she immediately gave grace. And I walked downstairs not feeling like a fraud anymore with that. I could actually tell her when I'm struggling. I could say, look, that's just not like Jesus. But that's how you pull out of hypocrisy. You just go, look, you pull a few friends aside and you go, look, I've been struggling with this for a long time. I just want some guys to know about it, to pray for me. At that moment, you cease to be a hypocrite. The only thing that makes you a hypocrite is the deception and the lie and the wall that you put up between the inconsistency in your life and what God is trying to make into you as a man. So hopefully that's an encouragement to you. Guys, we're just literally one step away from a far less hypocritical life and a Zoe type of an experience where God does healing in our lives. So be encouraged. You're not a million miles away from this. And hopefully the questions today will be helpful to you. we have a big staff meeting this week to talk about events. Our event revenue has gone down 90%. We're about to lose the biz, at least on paper. I don't think we are, but all the other event spaces are not giving the money back to the people that have booked weddings with them because they just can't afford it, or at least that's what they say. And I'm going to talk with our staff and just tell them that even if we go down, I want to give people their money back. These are usually struggling people that don't have a lot of money. They've put up $5,000, $6,000, $10,000 for a wedding. And I want us as a company to take the high road and just trust the Lord. And I know some of our staff may struggle with that. Some might love it. Some might be inspired. But this is the power of Zoe. Is just like, later on he's going to challenge us to do the Sabbath at some point in your life. What helps you align to where your rhetoric matches your religion is when you literally make decisions that represent God, whether or not it hurts you or not. So I want you to know I'm struggling with this. I would it'd be much easier to do a nice video for you and then go down to my place of work and mistreat people. So I'm battling this with you, but just was inspired that it's gotta all line up, right? So God bless you. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.